Mai ka pi'ina kala I ha'e ha'e ai ka mole olu ole Hawaii Kanaeokana loa. Melina mai kako, and welcome to Kanaeokana Talks for kumu by kumu. Today, we will be introduced to Pedagogy of Aloha Online segment 4, how to integrate ho'ike online teaching. This presentation is brought to you by my lovely mother, Kahakalau. O wau no o polani makamai ka owako kalani Kahakalau. Ke kia na lei a me ku Kahakalau. O waipi o ku ua wawa, o hi ilawe ku vai lele, o vai olena ku kai, o hilo ku one hana. Aloha. Before we get started, we are going to center ourselves by chanting Aloha e. Aloha e.
Aloha e na akua, aloha e na aumakua, aloha e na lio Hawai, aloha e na kūpuna, aloha e na makua, aloha e ka lehulehu, aloha e.
Mahalo.
Aloha mai kako, o wau o ku hinahina kui kahakai Kahakalau, ke kia lopaka Kahakalau, ke kia Williama ke ahonui Kahakalau, ke kia Daniela ke kino Kahakalau, a me ke au o pupele. O ki ia ku ohana no hoi, ku kāne o nā lei, ku hiapo o I ini mai kalani, e ala o polani makamai ku muliloa a me kāna ohana, o ia hoi o pakai a me kāna pepe o noveo, a me kāna kāne o no eau. O Honolulu ku'u o Nehanau, o Makua ku'u kai. O Hawaii ku'u mokupuni, o Ka'u ku'u moku. O Kilauea ku'u lua pele, o Waipio ku'u awawa. A o Kukui haile ku'u kūlana kauhale.
Just so that we all have a common foundation, can you please summarize one more time Pedagogy of Aloha?
Yes, I can. And before I start, I want to just make a little disclaimer. A'ohe pau ka ike I ka hālau ho'okahi. Not all knowledge is taught in one school. And so I have learned from many sources, and our kupuna always recognize that we can learn from many sources. And here are two of my sources that I am very blessed to count as people who have helped me and who have guided me, who have mentored me, and who I look at as role models. One of them is Auntie Pualani Kanaka Ole Kanahele, and I've been learning from her since the 80s. And Auntie Catherine Maunakea, same thing. I was privileged to learn from her while she was with us. Wonderful Loea Hawaii, olelo Hawaii, very skilled in la'aula pa'au. She was an excellent seamstress, a master lauhala weaver and laymaker, composer of songs. And so these are all people who have shaped me into who I am today. And so what is so important when it comes to pedagogy of aloha are the relations, right? And the relations that we have with our mentors, the relations that our students have with us are so, so important, because if you have amicable relations, if you love your teacher, if you love your mentor, if you love the people who are shaping you, then their impact on you is just so much greater, because you want to please them, you want to live up to their standards. And so it's really, really important as teachers that we create strong relations of aloha with the students, regardless of what age they are. The other part then is that whatever we're teaching has to be relevant and it has to make sense, right? If it doesn't make sense, why should we learn it, right? If it's not related to anything that we've ever heard of, how can we make sense of it? And then the other part is kuleana. How do we not just recognize our kuleana, but actually malama that kuleana, right? Because for us, it's not learning for learning's sake. It's learning so we can malama our kuleana. And so teaching our students that they have a kuleana, A, and then B, how to malama that kuleana. And then if we do those three things, if we start out with good, strong, amicable relations, use curriculum that makes sense, that is relevant, that's interesting, and teaches them about their kuleana, then we will end up with rigor. And that's what we're going to be talking about some more today. And if we do it right, we should also end up with fun. So the very important part as we start out, as I said, are the relations. And it's not just relations as between Kanaka, but it's also relations to the āina and relations to the akua. As far as relevance is concerned, we need to have curriculum that helps our students to get to know their place, where they come from, where they live, where they were born and raised better, where they learn about their native culture and their traditions, where they also are introduced to contemporary real world issues. So for example, clearly COVID has changed the world as we are experiencing it now. You can't go through the next school year and never mention COVID, right? It's impossible. You need to mention it no matter what you're teaching. And you need to make sure that the curriculum is tailored to the personal interests of the students so that they find what you are teaching them interesting and exciting. And then the kuleana is not just to themselves, but also their families, their communities, their lahui, and really the entire globe, the entire earth, what we call papaha naumoku. And so at this point, it's about rigor. How can we get our students to be competent academically? And that can also mean globally, right? When we're talking about world-class education, we generally refer to academic global competence. But it's not so much that we're only meeting the standards of those outside of Hawaii. It's also world-class to us also means to live up to the standards of our kūpuna.
But is rigor Hawaiian? Can rigor be Hawaiian?
That's really a good question because a lot of times the word rigor sounds very Western, right? Rigorous education. In fact, when we first started to do Hawaiian education, we had to put the word academically rigorous on every single pamphlet, on every single sheet of paper that we passed out, because this was in the 90s. In the 90s, Hawaiian education was remedial. It was for the dummies that couldn't handle the classroom. Let's put them in the taro patch. That was the mentality at that time. Whenever it was Hawaiian, it was not academically rigorous. And so for a long time, we thought that academically rigorous and Hawaiian don't go together. But that is totally wrong. When we look at our kūpuna and we look at olelo no eau, like kulia ikanu, and when we look at the things that they have created, our kūpuna always set extremely high standards and lived up to those standards. So I would say definitely that rigor, the concept of rigor, of doing things to the absolute best, going to that your own personal nu'u, so taking things to this very highest level is a very, very Hawaiian thing. And when you think of your uncles and your grandpas and your fathers, for example, and when they do things, it's done to perfection. You think of your moms and your grandmas and your aunties, and when they create things, whether it's a lei or whether it's a kapa, like a quilting or whatever they do, it's always at that highest standard. And as a matter of fact, as with the lei makers, we know that the front of the lei needs to be just as pretty as the back side of it. So this idea of rigor is certainly a Hawaiian concept. Maybe they didn't use that specific word, and I'm sure if you looked in the dictionary, there would not be a word for rigor, but that doesn't mean that the concept doesn't exist. We just didn't express it in one word, kind of thing. Lots of time also, when people think of rigor, they only think of academic or school, book smart kind of competence. But rigor is also cultural, Hawaiian competence, right? How comfortable are you with chanting? How many chants do you know? How well can you do those chants in public? Let's say, for example, what do you know about la'aulapa'aut, about medicines? What do you know about fishing and the different kinds of methods and the cleaning the fish or the seafood and preparing that is all rigor also, right? Culture and Hawaiian competence. And then there's also social and personal competence. How comfortable are you, speaking in front of people? How comfortable are you in meeting new people? All of those kind of things are also an important part of rigor, because no matter how book smart you are, if you cannot interact with people, then I wouldn't call you or your education a rigorous education. So making sure that we are comfortable as individuals and in groups is also very important when it comes to rigor. So here you see three pictures of different types of rigor. So one is a student who has created a science board. Now, when we were a school within a school, and then we left to become a charter school, the head of the science department told us, "Oh, I'm so sad that you students will never do any real science." And I looked at him and I said, "Why would you say that?" And they said, "Well, you're going to be at a campus that really doesn't even have classrooms. You certainly don't have a science lab. So that means your students will never do any real science." We proved them wrong in that our students went to science fairs every single year, not just local here for Hawaii Island, but state fairs and even beyond that, and won. And so that kind of rigor was created just going outside and doing real research projects. Um, we had these two young ladies that had been identified from elementary school on already, as needing special assistance. And when they said they wanted to compete in a soil competition, people told them, "Well, that's too rigorous for you. These are all science kids, from Waikea and from Hilo, and they're all into science. They know about chemistry and all this kind of stuff. You folks, what do you know about the soil?" Well, these two ladies knew a whole bunch about soil because they were growing food in that soil, and they had to test the soil to see what additional nutrients it needed, etc., etc. And so they came in third in an island-wide soil competition where nobody even gave them a chance when they first showed up. And even our littlest students, our kindergarteners, they are already telling others what they're learning and what they have created. They can articulate the rigorous education that they are experiencing. So as far as measuring and evaluating both the cultural and academic rigor, that's what we need Ho'ike for. Ho'ike is a very old concept. We know Ho'ike primarily from Hula, but Ho'ike was really done across the curriculum in all jobs. You didn't become a navigator without a Ho'ike, for example. And we have a cute story about Auntie Marie Solomon, who used to live in Kohala. Her grandfather was the last person to get trained as a kahuna as a navigator. And he was there from at Mahukona. There's a heiau called Holomoana there, and that's where he was trained from as young as maybe 5 or 6 years old until he was in his late 20s, early 30s, and then it was time for his Ho'ike. So they blindfolded him, put him on a canoe, took him way out into the ocean where they couldn't see any land, and for his Ho'ike, he had to make it back to Mahukona. Well, Grandpa did make it back to Hawaii, but unfortunately he landed on Kaho'olawe instead of on Mahukona. And therefore, what do you think happened? Maybe he got a C plus or a D minus or whatever letter grade? No, 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 no. In Hawaiian Ho'ike, there's only two things. Either you pass or you fail. And so in this case, Grandpa failed because he didn't go all the way to where he needed to go, which was to Mahukona. And so he had an option of continuing and then doing another Ho'ike in the future, or he could change his job, which in this case he did, and he became a sweet potato farmer. So this concept of Ho'ike is not just in Hula, but really throughout in traditional Hawaii, everybody would have to Ho'ike what it is that they learn. And as much as possible, these Ho'ike should be student-centered. So they should be really give the students an opportunity to show what they know, rather than, which our standardized tests do, show what they don't know, right? Most times when you take a standardized test, the only thing that for sure that test will tell us is what the students don't know. But many times we never ask the students what they actually do know. As much as possible, it should be multisensory and also personalized. Now, again, as I mentioned before, the kūpuna have set high standards for us. So this standards-based education is not something new to us at all. We've had standards set for thousands of years, and our kūpuna have tried to live up to and to achieve those standards. So ho'ike really in English can be expressed as performance-based assessment to an authentic audience. And when you go to Harvard or you go to Stanford into their departments of education and you ask them, what is the best way to assess what students actually know? They will tell you performance-based assessment to an authentic audience. Well, we've done that for 2,000 years. It's called ho'ike. It's our opportunity to exhibit whatever academic or cultural knowledge and life skills we have and do that in front of an authentic audience, meaning that it's people that don't know the answer, right? If I'm the teacher and you're telling me what you've learned, well, I should already know that information. So I'm not an authentic audience. Right. But if you have to go out into the community and you have to teach others and tell others about the things you have learned, and they're actually getting something as a result of that, that's the kind of ho'ike that we're talking about, that demonstrates rigor, both academic, cultural, and personal and social rigor. So the idea is that we want students to study and then create projects and performances that are purposeful and useful and allow them to exhibit, as I mentioned, what they know rather than what they don't know. And I think that is something that we are not used to because it's just so much easier to do a multiple choice or a true and false test. Before we used to have those scanatrons, so you just fill in the bubbles, you just put it into the machine and the answers come out and you got your grade for your students and all is fine. Not really, because that's the worst way to test students because sometimes they just don't care and they just fill out any kind of patterns on your scantron sheet, or it just doesn't really measure what they do know. It's more work, but if this is about us helping the students to get to their highest level, then we have to invest that time to allow them to ho'ike, to demonstrate what it is that they actually know. And so over the years, we've done many different projects that you now, having an online environment, can use, because these things will, ho'ike is oftentimes easier in an online environment than it is in person in terms of preparing the students for it. And then we have to be very creative in how we can get authentic audiences. But we will talk about that a little bit more. So one thing, for example, is that in order for our students to demonstrate what they have learned, they become the creators of information. So if they studied, for example, this book here called The Fish and the Gifts, on a Makana Naia, it's a bilingual book, you turn it over and there's the other side, was about the natural defense mechanisms of fish in Hawaii. So the students studied, what kind of mechanisms that the fish, some have spines, right? Some of them have poison, some of them shoot the ink like the squid, those kind of things. So they studied that. What better way of showing that they understood that than to write a book about how the fish got these protective qualities, for example. And this book became the book of the year. They won the Samuel Kahakalau Award in 2004. So, to have your students creating projects that they research and then that they illustrate, or that they illustrate in groups together. There's so many different ways that they can be done online. where they either use online tools in the first place and or use watercolors or pencil or crayon, whatever, and then scan it or take a picture of it and then upload it. Here's another book, also bilingual. On one side, it's in English. If you turn it around, these three books are in Hawaiian, and they're about taking care of the ocean, taking care of the rivers, taking care of the forest. So again, students looking into how do we mālama our environment. And then in this case, they created coloring books that have vocabulary that is in there, that have little paragraphs. So not that much writing, but a lot of thinking and organizing and laying things out. And again, and that would be something for those who already like to draw, right? You have certain kids in your class, no matter what, they're always doodling, always drawing. This is the kind of authentic assessments that you can do with them now, that they can stay home and they can actually stick with a project for a couple hours if they want to, or even a couple days. And that's always been the problem, in the classroom, that's just limited between 45 minutes and maybe an hour and a half. And then you're in the middle of you just getting into it, and next thing you know, the bell rings. Well, these kind of projects really allow the students to stick with it and finish what they have started. This was an ad for an anti-smoking campaign. Today, I would say we should do anti-vaping campaigns, right? Yes. Even though smoking is still an issue too. At that time, this was in 2003 or 4 as well. Our students, as they were doing some health research, found out that the highest demographic of smokers were teenage Hawaiian girls. So no other group within in Hawaii smoked more than teenage Hawaiian girls. Well, I was at first a little bit upset and said, how can they be so stupid? Until I remembered, well, I was a teenage Hawaiian girl who smoked, so I couldn't really say too much about it. So the students started to think, who would be the best person to influence teenage Hawaiian girl not to smoke. Certainly not an old auntie like myself telling them not to smoke because they hear it from their parents and grandparents or whatever. That's not going to work. But if, as part of their ho'ike, a young Hawaiian boy would tell them not to smoke and say, for example, well, do an ad campaign that says, I don't kiss girls who smoke, or, something along, I don't go out with girls who smoke, or I'd rather not, blah, 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 blah. Those kind of messages then, right, are something that these young girls would respond to. I certainly would have responded to if that was, was something that was told to me. And so by creating these authentic projects that then can influence others, that's really what Ho'ike is supposed to be all about, to demonstrate your knowledge. What did you learn about smoking or vaping, whatever it may be, right? What are the effects on your health? But then also bringing in that one piece where you're trying to make a difference, right? So Ho'ike, making a difference, not just for you to get a grade, right? That's not what it's only about. It's about for you to make a difference. Another thing that our students have been involved in is creating community signage. There's so many beautiful places in Hawaii, and nobody knows what it is, why it's called that, how long it's been there, whatever. So we live right above Waipio Valley at the Kukui Haile Lookout, Koa'ekea Lookout, and until this was maybe in 2005 or 6, I can't remember the exact year. When you would reach that lookout, you would look down and you see Waipio. And it would look green. There would be some water. Say, oh, that looks like, it does look like Terra Banks. It's kind of about 1,000-foot drop, so you can't really see it too good unless you got binoculars. Oh, that looks like a house. Oh, I wonder what happened over here. I mean, you'd have no clue what you were looking at. So the students decided to work together with the community and create 5 signs that talked about Waipio as the Valley of the Kings, Iwahi Pana, a very sacred and special place that we have a kuleana to take care of. And that was their ho'ike. The signs themselves. It was also great because when we unveiled the sign, we brought in the community and the kids
Had a
ho'ike and told the community, what we had done there. And these are projects that you can do online as well, working with your students. They do the research. You guys create something. You try and find funding, partnering with outside agencies. In our case, it was the Queen Liliuokalani Children's Center at that time, who actually bought or paid for the making of the signs. But other than that, it was really something that the students created as part of their ho'ike. Card games. One thing that we don't have enough is Hawaiian language materials, and so we had in our olelo Hawaii class, we had the proverb the olelo no eo aloha ki kahi ki kahi. And then we said, well, if you can say aloha ki kahi ki kahi, you can also say kokua ki kahi ki kahi, or malama ki kahi ki kahi. And so we had them create these go fish games with always 4 of the same thing, and then you would play fish, and then whoever got the most packs would be the winner, kind of thing. And then using words like e ho'oheno. Maybe that's not a common word heard all the time, but then you could increase their vocabulary. They could have fun playing, and it was their ho'ike again, was to create this resource that then could be used in a classroom for many classes after that. Other things are creating all kinds of other resources, language and culture resources such as moon calendars, greeting cards, that can have little sayings inside or olelo no eau. Our students are so creative, and we don't give them enough opportunity to really show off their skills when it comes to drawing and illustrating. There's so much emphasis on writing and not that much emphasis on them exploring their gifts and talents as an artist. And so these are all opportunities, creating posters. They learned about the makahiki season, and then they had to capture that to create a poster. Then that could be used even for income generating kind of thing. And so one of the students created this beautiful poster of the makahiki season. You see Lona Makua up here. You see the makali'i in the sky. You see the makali'i sailing canoe over here. You see the ipu and the ho'okupus in the front. So, they interpret these things then according to what they think, and then they have to explain that. That would be part of their ho'ikes, not just creating the poster, but being able to explain it at least orally. And then if they're really ma'at to doing it orally, then we can also ask them to do it in writing. So for many of our students, when they know that they are really presenting to a real audience, right, to an authentic audience, then they can see the purpose of their work, right? Then it makes sense. Okay, you got to do this so that these guys can learn. Well, if I need to be the one to teach somebody else, I'm going to put way more effort into it than if it's just, this is your assignment, I'm going to read it, and after I read it, it goes in the rubbish. Why should I try really hard if that's all that's going to happen to it? It's going to get thrown away after the teacher grades it. And so that phenomenon has been recognized, by people around the world. So, for example, Edutopia mentions that authentic audiences help students connect their work in the classroom to the real world. They provide a sense of buy-in for students, and they bring attention to their work, and that's what we want. We want the students to buy into it. And the way we do that is by allowing them to ho'ike, and we bring attention to their work. I'm going to tell you a little story about a young man named Ikaika. Ikaika came to us. He had been severely traumatized when his dad was killed by Pakalolo growers as he was trying to bulldoze some land in Puna for a papaya plantation. And Ikaika was really close to his dad, and he just didn't want to live anymore, really. He had nothing, his world was over, his life was over from his perspective when his dad died. He was first in a high-end special ed residential program, but they couldn't get him out of his shell. And so his mother, when she brought the sister, decided to bring him too, because he wasn't really doing anything in this other place, and that way she only had to drive to one place rather than two. Well, Ikaika was a wonderful guy and never made any trouble, but also didn't do any work whatsoever. And so finally, we created a book publishing project, and you saw some of that earlier. And he got to explore what he was going to write a book about. Now, Ikaika, even though he was in 10th grade, was like at a second grade reading level. And so, what can he write, right? He could barely read, barely write, but he loved animals and he lived on a farm. And so we told him, why don't you write about your farm? So he wrote a book, very simple. On my farm, I see a chicken. See, Ikaika and his father were chicken people. They took care of chicken and did all kinds of other things with chickens. And he loved his chickens. So on my farm, I see a chicken. And then he would make a beautiful collage kind of with special art process that he was taught by one of our artists who came to our school. And then on my farm, I see a sheep. On my farm, I see a horse. On my farm, I see a cow. On my farm, I see a pig. Super simple sentences, right? And he could even translate those into Hawaiian because he knew most of those words, mo and pua'a and pipi and all that. And so he actually got to publish his book. And then we took each of these pages, starting with the chicken, and we made them into a big poster and we framed them and we took it down to the hotel where we had a silent auction. And Ikaika's print of the chicken sold for $60. And when so that was bringing attention to his work, right? Here is Ikaika that everybody had given up on already because of this horrible thing that happened to him at such a young age. And here he was all of a sudden being his work in a silent auction and making $60 on that one print. I never forget when he walked out of that hotel exit. He was so proud, of who he was. And that would have never happened if we didn't give him that opportunity to ho'ike in a real sense. And then we took him, and I see the peer teaching here. Then when we had his book, we said, well, Ikaika, you got to read the book now. You wrote it. They want to hear the author. They don't want the teacher to read it to them. So we send him to our elementary kids. First, the kindergarten kids, they thought he was the bomb, the best reader in the world. First grade, second grade, they all thought he was the greatest reader. And after a while, reading to them regularly, first just the book that he wrote and then some other books because they wanted him to come back every time. And since he still wasn't doing too much in his regular classes, we figured nothing lost. We might as well have him go over to the elementary and read to them. He started to get better and better. And then when we knew he could really read the second grade material, we said, now the third graders want you. He heard all about you. They really want you to read to him. And within a year, Ikaika was able to move 6th grade level. So from 2nd grade to 8th grade, he was already in 10th grade. So he was still not technically at grade level, but he moved 6 grade levels in 1 year. Nobody has ever heard of that before. But it was because we allowed these older siblings, for us kaikuana, kaikaina, to peer teach, in this case, reading to the younger siblings, the kaikaina. Another thing that is now becoming very popular are TikToks, and using TikToks as a way to ho'ike what you have learned. I'm trying to see if I can just stop sharing that really quick so I can get onto this TikTok in real life. Give me a second here while I find it again. Oh no, this is here. One moment, it should be coming up shortly. And again, showing what the students can do. Don't need this right now. Any of this at all, gosh. What the students can do when they are given an opportunity to show ho'ike, things that they're supposed to learn. So in this case, this student decided to show how to train your dog in olelo Hawaii.
All right, let's do some commands in olelo Hawaii. Kaumana noho. Mai kai. Kaumana moi. Mai kai. Pa'a. Pa'a. Hele mai. Mai kai. Noho. Mai kai. Hele mai. Oku'u. Mai kai kika. Mai kai. Lima. Mai kai. Mai kai. Ki'i. Ki'i. My kai. See, I still try to forget her to ki'i my bia, but for now this gonna work.
That
So-
just wasn't any student. That was my Ana, my older sister, and her lovely dog Kaumana.
But these are the kind of these are the kind of examples in terms of, you know, what it is that your students can create that is authentic. Let me just get back to my thing here. That everybody will enjoy. I think we're in the right view here. Yeah, I think so. And so having your students creating TikToks like that, you know, to teach their friends and their family, olelo Hawai, let's say, creating cooking videos, creating, you know, how to do whatever it is, you know, making a tea leaf lay, whatever. The best way for them to learn is really to teach, right? And Ho'ike will allow them to do that. If you tell them you want them to create a TikTok where they are actually teaching something to either younger students, older students, their parents, community members, the general public. I mean, these things can become a viral, really, right? If you have something good that people want to know, these Ho'ike nowadays have an opportunity to reach tens of thousands of people or even more. And so, as much as possible, and that'll be something that we will figure out as we go along, is if they can present to authentic audiences, as I mentioned. So peer-to-peer presentations, you know, maybe right now they may not be done in person. You could do it through Zoom, right? Where instead of you being the speaker at the Zoom, every student gets 5 or 10 minutes to present something that they have learned to their peers. Another one is for them to do work as a group and then presenting it as a group. Or doing individual presentations. And I think, I'm assuming science fairs and all of those kind of exhibits will continue to go on, and students can prepare for those and enter those even with COVID. The other part is that we need to inform our government officials, our community, about the issues that are facing us today. You know, here in Hawaii, we're still looking at tourism as the golden goose. Well, maybe it's our students who can come up with better ideas and then convince our government officials that we shouldn't put all our eggs in that basket, that we should also put some of the money that's coming down from the federal government now to use it for sustainable agriculture, to start support entrepreneurship, etc. So this is ways that students can become involved and actually be change agents. Even though we have come a long way since 1978 and the beginning of that Hawaiian Renaissance, you know, there's still so many people, Hawaiian and non-Hawaiians in our communities, that know so little about Hawaiian language and culture. By creating opportunities for your students to perform in public and to teach the public about things about Hawaii, I think is an awesome experience for the students, not just to show what they really know, but also to educate others. And so whether you're doing individual or small group or large group projects, one of the things that these projects allow you to do, and and they can be done online, in terms of you giving the instructions to the students, preferably through video or audio files rather than pages and pages of written instruction. that they can research and study something that is of interest to them, right? That they can apply whatever information they got to their own design, to their own project, and then write and reflect or talk about their experiences. These projects will allow them to really demonstrate whatever skills that they have developed in the past and make connections with the community and take learning outside of the walls of the school. That is something that we've been wanting to do for a long time, and I think now we have that opportunity to do so. Obviously, group project or projects in general that end up with a hoike, which means you have to be finished by a certain time, also really help you in organizing your time. And we see that from the students that come from project-based schools, they are so much more adapted to a college environment when they get there because they've already learned how to manage their time. Versus others that are just given a worksheet today to finish it by tomorrow, they really don't know how to manage their time, both when they go into college and when they start jobs. One thing that we have been doing since 1997, our annual Hula drama that involved the whole school. And that is, again, a way for the students to exhibit what they have learned. So at Kanaeokana, each year there's a theme, and then all the different groups, clusters of groups, and they're usually multi-age, study some aspect of the theme and then present it at the end of the year to their peers, to the families, as well as the general public, and therefore educate other students from other schools, parents, as well as community members. And so one year, the theme was Kamehameha, and this particular group, I think they were middle schoolers, maybe some high schoolers, talked about how could a simple chief from Kohala become the king of the entire archipelago. And so one of the things about projects too is that you integrate multiple subject areas, and they had a text in this case which was Ruling Chiefs, which is actually a very complex and very thick book. But because they read it little by little, they read it over the whole year, little sections at a time, very much reading it together and then talking about it, acting out the scenes and things like that, so that they really got into the story. And then at the end of the year, they had to present something. And so they decided to focus on the Battle of Mo'okuauhau, where Kamehameha's warriors fight his cousin Keoa at Ke'e, and they created a chant and a hula about the battle and performed it during our hula drama. So you can see, and lots of this research, as I said, can be done online. They can read the books, they can come up with ideas, and then you have a Zoom where they all work together to make sure that they're prepared for their ho'ike. I have to change one more time because I would like you folks to see this electronic portfolio. One moment, please. Okay, so we've talked about electronic portfolios for decades, but I haven't seen too many good ones, to be perfectly honest. And most of all, I haven't really seen them used that much. And so I think this also, with COVID now, is a perfect time for your students to start their e-portfolios if they don't have one already. And then that portfolio will follow them all the way to college and beyond, to careers of their choice. And those portfolios should really also be personalized and ho'ike, or demonstrate what the students know and who they are. So when Polani's sister Inimai Kalani worked on her portfolio, and that's the one I had. Polani also has one. As a matter of fact, everybody at Kanaeokana had to do an electronic portfolio. She decided to show Waipio because that's where she was born and raised. She decided to start out with the Hawaiian ho'olauna, so that in case anybody was wondering, she put it out there right in the beginning that she is Hawaiian and these are the places that have shaped her into who she is. And then comes a professional summary in terms of who she is as a 21st century Hawaiian, and the kind of things that she's good at. Then she has her. So as I said, this portfolio was started in high school, probably middle and high school, and then as she went to college, she continued to build on this. So the bachelor's and all of that all came after Kanaeokana, obviously. But this is also something that I want to just point out, that when we started our charter school, a lot of parents were concerned and were worried that we would not prepare our students to go on to college. But as you can see here, Ina graduated with honors. She was a chancellor's scholar, which meant she got a 4-year tuition-free experience at Hilo, and actually designed her own personalized liberal studies degree integrating computer science, business e-commerce, and Hawaiian language and culture, along with minoring in Hawaiian studies and getting a certificate in computer application development specialization. So those are things that, again, were put in after graduation. But before that, while she attended Kanu, she also had an opportunity to participate in all kinds of ho'ike, and as a result of those ho'ike, particularly her science fair ho'ike, win all these other awards and honors over the years. And worked in the community and had experiences, again, doing authentic work in the community. And then she talks about her cultural skills before her technology skills. So this is where the students can put things the way that they want to be looked at, right? So if you think you want to get a job in technology and that's the most important part to put it up front, then you do that, right? If you value yourself as a cultural practitioner more, and you want to make sure that everybody understands that no matter what job you get, you're still going to perpetuate your culture. And if you have to go to do a ceremony, you're going to be doing your ceremony. That's all things that these electronic portfolios allow the students to ho'ike. And then this is, as I said, her portfolio as an adult. So she has mentioned what she started working in high school, and then all the way since now. She also has some personal projects on here. She loves music, and so she has a song that she composed, and that's over here. She also has some of the websites that she has already created as a web designer, and all kinds of other things. One of the projects that we do at Kuakanaka is Kanaka Kitchen, which is Iini's project. And so she talks about, what we do there, hours of healthy, high-end cooking, locally grown, inexpensive ingredients in an atmosphere of aloha, and all in Olelo, Hawaii. And then here are some of the delicious items that we cook and then obviously also eat. So that was just a little bit about electronic portfolios as another thing of ho'ike, because a lot of times we forget that is also what ho'ike is all about. Give me 1 second here. Almost there. 1 moment, please. Share. Okay. And that was, I think, our check. Yes.
Mahalo nui, Mama. How can people find out more about your pedagogy and your research methodology?
You can visit us at www.kuakanaka.com, and you will find all kinds of articles that we've written about pedagogy of aloha and about our Ma'awe Pono research methodology and the impact of Hawaiian-focused education on students. Also have some interviews there, etc. And you can also look at the various products and services that Kuakanaka offers in an effort to revitalize Hawaiian language and culture. If you want a copy of the PowerPoint, please feel free to email me, and I'll be happy to send you one. Just make sure you put PowerPoint ho'ike so that I know which PowerPoint you want, because this is one of this is the fourth of a series of 5 webinars on Pedagogy of Aloha, and so just making sure which one in the series that you want. And if you want all of them, that's fine as well. I'll be happy to send you all of those. At Kuakanaka, we believe in copyleft. We believe in sharing what we have learned freely, and all we ask people to do is to give credit where credit is due, which we also try to do, whenever we use things that we have been shared with us from others. And so the most important part for us is to empower our lahui, to give our students the tools so that they can thrive again as 21st century Hawaiians.
In closing, we would like to share with you folks in Oli. Mahalo e, mahalo e ka lehulehu, mahalo e nā makua, mahalo e nā kūpuna, mahalo e nā li'i o Hawai, mahalo e nā au makua, mahalo e nā akua. Mahalo e. Mahalo.
Mahalo, ahui ho, malama pono.